AITA for kicking my brother and his family out of my house after he turned my basement into his personal business headquarters without telling me. I'm a 34-year-old married guy with a pretty normal life, except for the fact that my older brother, 38, has the survival instincts of a houseplant. My wife and I bought our small 2-story home 3 years ago. It's nothing extravagant, but it's ours, and we've worked hard to keep it in good shape. It has a finished basement that my wife uses as a craft room and part-time office for her Etsy shop. She makes custom candles and stationery, and while it doesn't bring in a full income, it's something she loves and takes seriously. 4 months ago, my brother, his wife, and their 2 kids hit financial trouble. He claimed he'd been unfairly let go from his job, but knowing his history, that usually means he mouthed off to his supervisor or just stopped showing up. His wife works part-time at a daycare, but they were falling behind on rent fast. My wife and I agreed to let them stay in our guest room for no more than 2 months max. This was not meant to be a long-term arrangement. We weren't charging rent, but we explicitly laid ground rules. Contribute where you can, clean up after yourselves, respect shared spaces, ask before using the basement, and absolutely do not move or touch my wife's inventory, tools, or materials. My brother agreed to all of this with an exaggerated hand-to-heart gesture like I was asking him to sign the Geneva Convention. The first few weeks were fine. His kids are loud but polite, and my sister-in-law tried helping out around the house. My brother, on the other hand, spent most of his time on his laptop applying for jobs in bursts of 10 minutes before spiraling into video games for 3 hours. But fine, he's family. The problem started when packages began showing up at my house addressed to him. At first, I thought they were personal items. Then more came. Then more. One day I walked into my basement and found it completely reorganized. My wife's neatly labeled shelves had been pushed aside. Her candle wax blocks were crammed into a corner. And in the center of the room was a folding table with stacks of generic gadgets. Phone grips, LED keychains, knockoff wireless headphones, bulk sunglasses, and other cheap stuff. My brother proudly announced that he had started a resale empire. He had apparently watched a bunch of videos on flipping wholesale items online and decided this was his new calling. He just never mentioned that he planned to use my home as his warehouse. I confronted him and asked why he didn't ask before taking over the basement. He said, "Dude, it's empty space. I'm just using it efficiently. We're family. It's not a big deal." I reminded him my wife's business was down there and she depended on that space. He waved that off like she was a kid playing pretend. That already had me boiling. But it got worse. Because he started storing so many boxes, he blocked the vent that helps regulate humidity in the basement. My wife discovered several of her candle molds had warped from overheating. Some of her stationery materials got moisture damaged. A week's worth of inventory, stuff she had spent hours making, was ruined. When she confronted him about it, he told her, "Relax, you can just make more. That's the beauty of crafting." She cried, and he just shrugged. That's when I told him he had 48 hours to clear everything out and move his so-called business somewhere else. He accused me of sabotaging his chance to support his family. He said I owed him because he's helped me out in the past, by which he meant giving me a ride to the airport once in 2016. He begged. My sister-in-law apologized nonstop, but I held firm. 48 hours. He didn't clear the basement. Instead, he doubled down and ordered more boxes. I found this out when I got home from work and practically tripped over a knee-high wall of cheap merchandise at my front door. That night, I told him he needed to leave by the end of the week. Not just the basement, the house. That's when everything truly exploded. He told the rest of our family that I was throwing his children onto the street. They started blowing up my phone with messages about family loyalty. My mother dramatically told me she was disappointed but not surprised because I've always been selfish. When I asked her if she could house them instead, she suddenly remembered she doesn't have a room, even though she has a 3-bedroom place and lives alone. My brother spent the next few days stomping around the house, slamming doors, loudly sighing, and announcing that he couldn't possibly find a job because he was emotionally devastated by betrayal. He also kept his kids awake, telling them they might never have a home again, which my wife overheard. That's when she told me she couldn't live like this anymore. So I stuck to my deadline. On the final day, I told them they had until evening to pack. When my brother refused, I called a storage company, paid for 1 month of a small unit, and had everything from the basement moved into it, including his merchandise. He flipped out, said I was stealing his livelihood, and threatened to legally come after me. I reminded him everything was intact, stored, labeled, and he had full access. He still called me a heartless pig. He finally left, but not before telling my neighbors I'd evicted my own blood. Some of them gave me weird looks for days. Now my immediate family is split. My sister-in-law actually texted my wife apologizing again and saying she understood why we did what we did. But my brother? He hasn't spoken to me since and keeps posting vague Facebook rants about fake family and haters trying to stop your grind. I feel like I did the right thing, but the guilt is real. They were in a bad spot, and maybe I escalated too hard by moving his stuff. But at the same time, he destroyed part of my wife's livelihood, disrespected our home, lied by omission, and didn't lift a finger to fix any of it. So, Reddit-style internet strangers. AITA? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep creating more great content. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks so much for your support. AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée move into my house after she showed up unannounced and started rearranging my life. A few years ago, I bought a small 2-bedroom house. It isn't fancy, but it's mine, and I've worked hard to keep in good shape. My younger brother, Mark, has always been the golden child in our family. I love him, but I'd be lying if I said he didn't have a reputation for letting everyone else handle the boring parts of adulthood. His new fiancée, Tessa, is the opposite in all the worst ways. She's charismatic, very sure of herself, and absolutely convinced she knows how everyone else should live. I had only met her a handful of times before this whole situation blew up. She always had a comment about my house looking a little plain, or my kitchen being outdated, or how I should really think about putting in new floors. I politely ignored her because I don't mind constructive feedback, but she spoke like a person critiquing a contestant on a home makeover show she didn't even like. A month ago, my brother called and said they were having trouble at their apartment because of a mold issue and needed to stay somewhere temporarily. I said they could crash for a weekend while they sorted things out, but that I couldn't host long-term. I work from home, I value my space, and the second bedroom is my office. Mark said it was fine. They showed up Friday night with what looked suspiciously like a week's worth of suitcases. I reminded them it was only for the weekend, and Mark kept saying, "Don't worry, we'll figure things out." Tessa barely acknowledged me and went straight to the guest room, then immediately complained about it being cramped. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of something dragging across the floor. I walked into the living room to see my couch pushed aside, my rug rolled up, and Tessa measuring the floor with a tape measure like she was planning a renovation. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "We're going to need more space if we're staying longer." I reminded her they were not staying longer. She just gave me a tight smile and said, "Well, Mark talked to your mom, and she said it would be fine." That set off every alarm bell in my head. I called my mom, who admitted that yes, she'd told Mark it would be easier for me to host them since I had a house, not an apartment, and that it would only be for a month or two until their lease situation got sorted. I told her she should not be volunteering my home, and she said something like, "You're being dramatic. It's family." By the time I went back inside, Tessa had opened several of my kitchen cabinets and was stacking my dishes on the counter, saying she needed the space for their things. I lost my patience and told them both that the weekend was the limit, period. No extensions. No negotiations. Tessa rolled her eyes and said, "You can't seriously expect us to find a place in 2 days. That's completely unreasonable." I said it wasn't my problem. Mark started guilt-tripping me, saying they were basically homeless, and he would have done this for me. That's not true. He's never taken responsibility for anything that wasn't convenient for him, but I didn't want a full fight, so I said we'd talk again the next morning. I barely slept because I was so stressed. When I got up Sunday, I found Tessa in my office, sitting at my desk with my work laptop open. Not turned on, open like she tried to log in. When I demanded to know why she was in there, she said the room made more sense as their bedroom, and she needed to see how much space they'd have. She dismissed my anger by saying, "You're being territorial. It's not that deep." That was the breaking point. I told them both to pack everything and leave within the hour. Mark blew up, saying I was being unreasonable and selfish, and Tessa kept muttering about how she couldn't believe I was kicking them out. They stalled until I finally said if they weren't out in 30 minutes, I'd call the police and report trespassing. That got them moving. My family exploded. My mom said I humiliated Mark and made Tessa feel unwelcome. My dad said I overreacted but should apologize for escalating it. My older sister thinks I should have tolerated them for at least a couple of weeks. The only one on my side is my cousin, who told me Tessa tried similar boundary-stomping behavior at her place once. Mark and Tessa ended up finding a short-term rental within 3 days, which makes me feel even more like they just wanted free housing and assumed I'd cave. They're both furious with me. Mark said I completely embarrassed him and that Tessa cried the entire night because she felt rejected by her new family. I've been going back and forth on whether I acted too harshly. I didn't like kicking them out, but the idea of living with someone who tries to rearrange my life without asking feels suffocating. And the fact she tried to access my office without permission honestly scared me. My mom keeps nagging me to apologize because, in her words, Tessa is becoming part of our family, and I need to keep the peace. I told her maybe Tessa should start by respecting the people she wants to join. Now the whole family is annoyed, my brother barely speaks to me, and I'm wondering if I really am the villain for not sacrificing a month or two of comfort for the sake of family. So, AITA for refusing to let them stay and kicking them out after everything they did? AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée use my house for their wedding after they tried to secretly move in? A few months ago, I bought my first home. It's a modest 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but it's the biggest accomplishment of my adult life. I'm 29, single, and have been saving for years while working a job that isn't glamorous but pays the bills. I was proud enough that I hosted a small housewarming for my family. Everyone congratulated me, particularly my older brother, Jason, who is 33, and his fiancée, Tessa. Jason and I grew up pretty close, but in adulthood, our lifestyles diverged. I'm stable and boring according to him, while he is in the phase of chasing big dreams and bouncing between gigs. He and Tessa have lived in 4 different rentals in the last 2 years, mostly because they either couldn't keep up with rent or they clashed with landlords. They insist they're victims of bad luck. At my housewarming, Tessa kept making little comments like, "This place has great light for wedding photos and wow, the backyard would look amazing with lights draped across it." I assumed she meant in a general sense and didn't think much of it. But about a week later, Jason called and asked if they could have their wedding ceremony in my backyard. They wanted something small, intimate, low budget. I said I'd think about it. The truth was I felt a little uncomfortable. My backyard is decent, but it isn't a wedding venue. I also didn't want the hassle of hosting dozens of people I barely knew, dealing with damage, cleanup, noise, liability, and everything else. Still, I told them I'd consider it if they could cover setup and cleanup and if the guest list stayed small. Apparently, that wasn't good enough. Fast forward 2 weeks. I came home from work early because my boss let us out after a system outage. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Jason's truck parked there. At first, I assumed he dropped by to say hi. But when I walked inside, I nearly had a heart attack. Half my living room was filled with boxes. Some were labeled Jason, others Tessa. Both of them were in my kitchen, unpacking groceries into my fridge. I asked them what the hell they were doing. Tessa said, very casually, "We figured it'd be easier to plan the wedding from here, and we needed to move out of our current place because it's basically unlivable. We thought this could be a temporary base." I told them I never agreed to them moving in. Jason said, "You never said we couldn't," which was such an absurd argument that I laughed out loud. I told them to leave immediately and take their stuff with them. Jason argued that they had nowhere else to go and that family should help. Tessa began crying, saying they'd been so stressed planning the wedding. I repeated that I wasn't comfortable with anyone living in my house without a proper agreement, especially when they didn't even ask. Jason got mad and accused me of being selfish, saying I cared more about my precious house than their safety and happiness. I said they could stay for a night while they made arrangements, but I wasn't letting them move in. That didn't go over well. Jason stormed around grabbing boxes and slamming cabinet doors. Tessa cried the entire time. They left after about an hour. I thought that was the end of the drama. Oh no. The next morning, I woke up to 30-plus messages in the family group chat. Jason had written a long rant claiming I kicked him and his fiancée to the curb when they were homeless. He said all they wanted was temporary help and that I humiliated them. Several aunts and cousins chimed in saying that family should support each other. My mom called, asking why I didn't at least let them stay a few weeks. When I explained what actually happened, my mom said, "Well, that wasn't right of them, but you know how Jason is. He doesn't think things through. Maybe you should have been kinder about it." My dad took my side, saying my house was my responsibility and that Jason had no business moving in without permission, but he stayed mostly neutral. Then, a week later, Jason called me again. I didn't want to answer, but I did. He apologized in a half-hearted way, saying he was stressed, and then immediately pivoted to saying, "So, about the wedding. We still want to have it in your backyard. We'll behave. Promise." I told him no. Absolutely no. After what happened, the trust was gone. I didn't want dozens of people on my property if the couple hosting the event had already shown they'd crossed boundaries. Jason exploded again, calling me petty and vindictive. Tessa posted a vague Facebook status about certain people sabotaging others' happiness. Now extended family members I haven't heard from in years are messaging me asking why I'm ruining their wedding. A cousin told me privately that Jason and Tessa had already told people the wedding would be at my place, and they didn't want to pay for a venue. Another person said they were planning to move in for at least a month to save money before the wedding, which they apparently mentioned at a gathering I wasn't invited to. Learning that confirmed for me that I made the right call. I love my brother, but he has a long history of assuming everyone will just bend to his plans. I'm exhausted for being painted as the villain for enforcing basic boundaries about my own home. But part of me still wonders if I should have just sucked it up, let them stay a few weeks, and allowed the backyard wedding to keep the peace. My mom keeps saying things like, "It's family. Sometimes we make sacrifices." But I've sacrificed my entire adolescence covering for Jason's irresponsibility, defending him to teachers, giving him money I couldn't spare, and being the one who cleaned up every mess he created. I am tired. Still, hearing half my family call me cold has messed with my head. Maybe I could have handled things calmer. Maybe I should have given them another chance. Maybe saying no to the wedding makes me look vindictive. So AITA? AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's kids after she secretly tested my maternal instinct and humiliated me in front of the whole family? I am a 28-year-old woman who has never really wanted children. I like kids, I'm just not drawn to motherhood the way my older sister, Erin, is. She has 3 kids under 7 and has always been very vocal about believing that raising children is the ultimate life purpose. I've always brushed off her comments because I figured she meant well even if she was condescending. For context, I work as a project manager for a tech company. I love my job. I travel a lot. I work long hours, and I enjoy the freedom of having control over my own schedule. My parents respect that. Erin tolerates it, but she often tells me I'll change my mind when my biological clock wakes up. Last month, my parents hosted a big family dinner. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole group. I showed up expecting the usual chaos, but Erin greeted me at the door with this overly bright smile that immediately made me suspicious. She said she was so glad I could make it, and that tonight would be interesting. I should have turned around and left. About an hour into dinner, while everyone was chatting, Erin suddenly announced she had a surprise. She brought out a baby doll, not a cute plush doll, the most realistic infant doll I have ever seen. It blinked, cooed, cried, and even had a weighted body. She stood behind me, placed the doll in my arms, and loudly said, "Let's see how long Annie can handle a real baby. Maybe it'll awaken something." Everyone laughed. I froze. I asked what the hell she was doing, and she said she and her husband bought the doll to help her cousin's daughter prepare for babysitting, and she thought it would be funny to see how I do with it. My parents looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. I tried to hand the doll back, but she told me it was just a bit of fun. Then she pressed a button on her phone, and suddenly the doll started wailing. She'd set it into newborn mode, the kind that doesn't stop crying until you hold it a certain way, rock it, or pretend to feed it. Everyone turned to stare at me. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I stood up, trying to calm the thing. But Erin followed me around the living room with her phone, recording me while making comments like, "She's holding it like it's radioactive, and imagine if that were a real baby." She even said to the whole room, "Let's see how long before she gives up." I gave up after about 2 minutes. I shoved the doll into her husband's hands and told her to cut it out. Erin dramatically said she was just trying to show me what I was missing out on. I told her I wasn't missing anything except unnecessary stress, and that I was done participating. For the rest of the evening, she made snide remarks about how some people just don't have the instinct, and that she pities me. I left early, furious. The next day, she texted me, asking if I could babysit her kids the following weekend because she had a last-minute work event and her husband would be out of town. I didn't respond right away because I needed to cool off. Later that night, she sent a follow-up text saying I owed her, since the doll incident was just harmless fun and I was being too sensitive. That pushed me over the edge. I replied that after being publicly mocked and used as entertainment, I was no longer comfortable being around her kids without her present. I said I didn't trust her not to pull something like that again, and that her behavior made it clear she didn't respect me or my choices. She blew up, sent paragraph after paragraph accusing me of punishing her children for her mistake, of being selfish and immature, of running away from responsibility, and proving I wasn't suited for motherhood. She then dragged my family into it, saying I was unreliable and childish. My parents asked me what happened, and when I told them, they mostly sided with me, saying Erin took the joke too far. But they did ask if I could find it in my heart to help her just this once because she really needed support. I told them no. I wasn't budging. Word got around the family, and now I have a couple of aunts claiming I'm being cruel, that family helps family, and that refusing to babysit is punishment. One aunt said I was letting pride get in the way of doing the right thing. But here's the thing. I would have babysat if she had just asked like a normal person. I have done it before multiple times, and I've never had an issue. But after the stunt she pulled, I feel like babysitting would send the message that her behavior had no consequences. And I don't want to subject myself to any more of her weird tests or judgments. Erin is still texting me, alternating between guilt-tripping and calling me selfish. She even said, "You're proving my point about you not being ready to be an adult." That one burned. My mom thinks Erin owes me a serious apology. Dad said he won't get involved anymore because Erin created the mess. But some relatives think I should just let it go and help with the kids. I'm torn. I don't want to punish the kids, but I also don't want to enable Erin or put myself back into a situation where she thinks she can use me as a prop for her insecurities. And I honestly feel like standing my ground is the only way she'll ever learn. So, AITA for refusing to babysit after she humiliated me. AITA for refusing to let my sister move back into my house after she blew up my relationship and then expected everything to go back to normal. A few years ago, when I bought my first home, I offered my younger sister, Leah, a room because she was struggling financially. She was 23, between jobs, and dealing with a breakup. I didn't charge her rent, just asked that she handle basic chores and contribute to groceries when she could. For the first few months, it was fine. She was grateful, helped around the house, and we actually got closer. Then things changed fast. Leah started dating a guy named Tyler. From the moment he walked in the door, I got weird vibes. He was the type who bragged constantly about things you couldn't verify, like how he could have gone pro in multiple sports or that he turned down a six-figure job because it wasn't challenging enough. He also commented way too much on my life, my house, my job, my routine. It was like he was evaluating everything, mentally rearranging my life according to what he thought made sense. Still, I stayed polite. It wasn't my boyfriend. But then he started showing up at the house, even when Leo wasn't home. I'd come back from work and find him in the kitchen eating my food, or in the living room watching TV loudly with his shoes on the coffee table. When I told Leah this wasn't okay, she acted like I was overreacting. She said he felt comfortable here, and that I should be happy her boyfriend liked me enough to hang out. One night, I came home to find him in my office on my computer, my work computer. When I asked what he was doing, he said Leah told him it was fine to print something. Except he wasn't printing. He had multiple tabs open, some with my work email, some with files I had saved. I asked him to leave, and he acted like I was being rude. Leah got mad at me for embarrassing him. That was the first real blow-up. I told Leah very clearly, no more letting people in my office, and Tyler needed boundaries. She pretended to agree, then cried to our mom that I was being controlling. Our mom yelled at me, saying Leah was going through a hard time and I needed to be more compassionate. I held my ground. A month later, my boyfriend, Daniel, moved in with me. He and I had been together for almost 2 years, and it was planned long before Leah's situation. At first, Daniel and Leah got along well enough, but Tyler hated him. He made snide comments constantly about Daniel's job in IT, saying he wasn't a real man because he sat all day pushing buttons. Daniel brushed it off, but I saw it bothered him. Then Tyler started hanging out at the house even more. He'd show up, Leah would let him in, and they'd take over the common areas. I once found them drunk in the kitchen at 2 a.m. yelling at each other about who loved the other more. They woke Daniel up when he had work early the next morning. When I confronted Leah, she said it was our house too, and they were adults who should be allowed to have fun. Daniel told me he was starting to feel uncomfortable in the house we both paid for. That was the tipping point. I sat Leah down and laid out very clear boundaries. Tyler was no longer allowed over. If she wanted to see him, she needed to go to his place. She exploded. She said I was controlling, jealous, acting like some dictator in the house, and that Tyler had more respect for her than I ever did. Then she stormed out. The next day I got home and discovered she had packed up her room and moved in with Tyler. No warning, no conversation, just gone. She also left the room trashed, and I later realized she took several things of mine. Towels, my old tablet, a couple of kitchen appliances. I confronted her, and she said they were gifts I had given her, which was a lie. I blocked Tyler after he sent me a long text about how I was a terrible brother and Leah deserved better family. Months passed. I cleaned the room, fixed the damage, and actually enjoyed the peace. Daniel and I got engaged that year. Then, surprise, Leah and Tyler broke up spectacularly. He had been cheating on her, using her money, and treating her like garbage. She showed up at my house out of the blue, crying and begging to move back in just for a few months. I felt sympathy, I really did. But I remembered everything. The entitlement, the disrespect, the lies, the way she weaponized our mom against me, the way she left the house an absolute mess. I told her no, calmly, not angrily. I said I would help her find a temporary place and loan her some money for deposits, but she couldn't move in with us again. She stared at me like I'd slapped her, then started yelling that family is supposed to help each other, that I was choosing Daniel over her, and that she had nowhere else to go. I reminded her that when she left, she said the house wasn't her home anymore. She screamed that I should get over one mistake, and that I was punishing her for being in a bad relationship. Now my mom is heavily involved again, calling me cold and selfish. She said Leah is fragile and needs support, and that I'm holding a grudge. Daniel supports my decision, but says he knows this is tearing me up. Leah has been staying with a friend in a cramped apartment and keeps sending me guilt-tripping messages. She also posted a vague rant on social media about siblings who think they're better than you. I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh. I know she's hurting, but I also know how bad things were when she lived here, how much stress it caused, and how hard I've worked to make my home peaceful. So, AITA for refusing to let her move back in, even though she says she's desperate. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé walk me down the aisle after my dad backed out at the last minute. I'm 27 and getting married in 2 months. I'm not a very dramatic person, but my family has a way of creating chaos where none is required. My dad and I have never been super close, but we were close enough that I thought he'd walk me down the aisle. He said yes when I asked last year, and we had a couple of awkward but sweet conversations about it. He even got fitted for a suit. 3 weeks ago, he calls me and says he can't do it. Not for a tragic reason, not for a scheduling issue, but because he doesn't feel emotionally up to it and thinks it would be dishonest symbolism since we aren't as close as a father and daughter should be. He said he'd feel like a hypocrite participating in a ritual that implies a relationship we never had. I was hurt, shocked, and honestly angry. I told him he didn't have to overthink it. It was a symbolic gesture because he is my dad. He doubled down and said he hoped I'd understand. I told him I didn't. My sister, who's 24 and engaged to someone I'll call Ben, has always been more aligned with my dad emotionally. She sees him as a gentle, sensitive soul, while I sometimes see him as conflict avoidant to the point of selfishness. She immediately took his side. She said I was pressuring him to perform a role he didn't feel comfortable with. I said he'd agreed to it and waited until just before the wedding to back out. She said I was making his vulnerability about myself. A few days after the call, my sister suggested an alternative. Her fiancé, Ben, could walk me down the aisle. She said it would be a beautiful symbol of expanding family, and that he was honored by the idea. I stared at her like she'd announced she wanted to auction off one of my organs. I barely know this man. He's fine, polite, kind of boring, very into exotic teas. But walk me down the aisle? Absolutely not. I told her I'd rather walk alone, or ask my mom, or my stepdad, or literally anyone else. She got upset and said that rejecting Ben was cruel. It made it look like she and her fiancé weren't truly welcomed into my life. I told her this had nothing to do with welcoming anyone and everything to do with her trying to reshape my wedding to make our dad feel less guilty. Here's where things escalated. My dad called me again and said he heard I'd snapped at my sister. I told him I had not snapped. I had just declined an absurd suggestion. He said I was lashing out because I'm hurt. I told him maybe I was hurt and maybe I had a right to be. He sighed like I was being childish and said if I center the wedding around bitterness, he might not attend at all. That one stung. He'd gone from refusing to walk me down the aisle to threatening not to show up to my wedding at all. I told him if he didn't come, that was his decision, but I wasn't going to beg. My mom, who is divorced from him and on my side but exhausted by all this, told me she'd walk me down the aisle if I wanted. My stepdad offered too. Both feel natural to me. I adore my stepdad. He's been in my life since I was 11. He's the one who taught me how to drive, helped me move into every apartment, and actually shows up when he says he will. But I hesitated because I thought choosing him might escalate things further with my dad. Then my sister sent a long message in the family group chat saying she and Ben were hurt by my rejection of their generous offer. She said I was humiliating Dad by implying he failed me, and that my wedding was becoming a public display of resentment instead of a celebration of love. My dad responded with a thumbs-up emoji, which is so passive-aggressive it made me want to scream. My fiancé, meanwhile, thinks all of this is ridiculous. He says it's our wedding, and I should choose the person who actually makes sense to walk me down the aisle, not the one who creates the least emotional politics. He also said, and this made me laugh, that if my sister keeps pushing, he'll ask his 84-year-old grandmother to walk me down the aisle, so the symbolism becomes so confusing that everyone will shut up. After a week of stress, I decided I'm asking my stepdad. He means something to me, he wants to do it, and he's actually been a parent. I messaged my dad to tell him. He didn't answer for 2 days. When he finally replied, he said he was disappointed I'd pick someone else over him, even though he'd explicitly refused the role. He said it made him look bad. I responded, "You chose to opt out. I chose someone who didn't." He left me on read. My sister called 30 minutes later, furious. She said my choice was petty revenge and that Dad was now too ashamed to attend the wedding because people would judge him. I said if he skips the wedding, that's on him, not me. She said it was on me because I refused every compromise and made Dad's anxiety worse. Now half my extended family is sending me polite but pointed messages about family unity and not embarrassing your father. My fiancé's family thinks this whole saga is insane and are jokingly placing bets on whether my dad will show up. I'm exhausted. I never expected the simple act of choosing who walks me down the aisle to become a diplomatic crisis. I didn't expect my dad, who has always been emotionally distant but not cruel, to guilt-trip me like this. And I definitely didn't expect my sister to treat her fiancé walking me down the aisle as if she were offering me a rare honor instead of a deeply uncomfortable substitution. Part of me wonders if I should have just walked alone to avoid all this. But another part of me resents that I'm the one expected to compromise at every turn to manage their discomfort. So, am I the one being unreasonable here? AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her emotional support horse to my backyard wedding and causing a family meltdown that now has half my relatives calling me a selfish control freak. My fiancé and I are getting married in June in our own backyard. It's a fairly large yard with a garden, a little pond, and a renovated patio. We planned a small ceremony with around 60 people, a nice dinner, dancing under some lights we strung up, and a general relaxed vibe. It's not meant to be super fancy, but we've put a lot of work into the landscaping and decor. My sister, who I'll call Jenna, has recently gone through what she calls a personal awakening. She used to be pretty practical and down-to-earth, but after a rough breakup last year, she started leaning heavily into holistic wellness communities online. I'm not knocking anyone's coping mechanisms, but she goes full tilt. Reiki healing, crystal therapy, moon rituals, the whole spectrum. And her newest self-care anchor is a 5-year-old miniature horse named Butterbean. Butterbean is adorable, I'll admit that, but he is still a horse. A real, breathing, hay-smelling, ground-pooping horse. Jenna insists he is an emotional support animal. She even got him a little vest that says ESA in big capital letters. She brings him places absolutely no one expects a horse to be. The hardware store, our parents' living room, the local coffee shop, which shut down that visit within 3 minutes, and once she tried to bring him into an optometrist's office. That one created a whole local Facebook blow-up. For my wedding, Jenna assumed Butterbean was automatically invited. I thought she was joking when she brought it up. She wasn't. She told me she needs him there because big events trigger her anxiety and Butterbean's energetic field protects her aura. I tried to be diplomatic and said I didn't think it would work with the venue, the guests, or the setup. She immediately got defensive and said I was discriminating against her disability. She does not have a diagnosed disability, just to be clear. I asked if she could talk to her therapist, but she said her therapist was aligned with her truth and encouraged her connection with Butterbean. I suspect this therapist might be more of a spiritual coach she found online, but that's speculation. I explained several practical concerns. Butterbean poops unpredictably. Horses do that. Our yard has narrow paths and decorations everywhere. We're renting white chairs, white linens, and an aisle runner. We're also serving food buffet style, and the reception involves dancing. A horse in the middle of that? Best case, chaos. Worst case, someone gets kicked. She countered that Butterbean is extremely gentle and in tune with human vibrations, whatever that means. I said okay, but the venue, my own property, still doesn't allow animals other than my dog, who will be staying inside during the ceremony. Jenna said I was being dramatic. Things escalated when she told our parents. My mom, who has always tiptoed around Jenna's emotions, immediately took her side. She said Butterbean is basically a companion like a therapy dog and that denying him is cruel. But again, this is a horse. And my parents haven't hosted Butterbean inside their house since the day he knocked over my dad's heirloom floor lamp and left hoof dents in the hardwood. Even they know the logistical problems, but they'll bend every principle if Jenna cries enough. My dad stayed quiet first, but then said, well, maybe we can set up a pen in a corner of the yard? As if having a penned horse at my wedding like some kind of rustic petting zoo is better. I said absolutely not. Then my mom accused me of being controlling. Jenna sulked dramatically and said I was blocking her healing path. About a week later, she sent me a long message telling me she will not attend the wedding unless Butterbean can attend. She also said she would need space to ground herself during the ceremony, and Butterbean is essential for that grounding. I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but my decision was final. Now the extended family has gotten involved. One aunt who is very into alternative spirituality is on Jenna's side, calling me oppressive and narrow-minded. A cousin texted me that she can't believe I'm banning an ESA from my own yard. I pointed out that horses are not ESAs in the legal sense, and even if they were, private events on private property have different rules. Another cousin jokingly asked if I planned to hire bouncers to keep Butterbean out. I don't know if he was joking or offering, because at this point I might need one. My friends are mostly on my side, Though one did say that maybe letting the horse attend for just the ceremony wouldn't be the end of the world. But I can picture Butterbean weaving through chairs, snorting loudly during vows, getting spooked by applause, and leaving a steaming mess right behind me. My fiancé is fully with me, but says we should try to de-escalate. He suggested inviting Jenna over to see the wedding setup and explaining everything calmly. We did that. She stared at the seating arrangement like she was assessing fault lines in a map, then said she could stand in the back with Butterbean on a lead. I reminded her that the lead was not the main issue. The horse being present at all was. She left crying. So now half the family thinks I'm persecuting Jenna. The other half is staying neutral, and Jenna keeps posting vague messages online about family betrayals and standing firm in your truth even when others suffocate your light. People keep messaging me asking what happened and whether we really banned a therapeutic horse. I love my sister. I want her at my wedding. But I do not want livestock wandering around during one of the most important days of my life. She insists I'm making a huge deal out of nothing. I insist she's the one making this impossible. So, AITA for putting my foot down and refusing to let a horse attend my backyard wedding. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his pregnant wife move into my house after they got evicted, even though I have a space. For context, I'm 34 and own a 4-bedroom house that I bought 4 years ago. I live alone except for my dog, Milo. I worked a lot of overtime, lived cheaply for years, and inherited a small amount from my grandmother that helped with the down payment. I'm proud of what I built because stability wasn't something I grew up with. My younger brother, Dan, is 29. He's always been the charismatic, impulsive one. He bounced between jobs, tried a few side hustles, and has always had an excuse for why something didn't work out. He married his wife, Jenna, 2 years ago. She's nice, but she enables him when it comes to financial irresponsibility. They rent a 2-bedroom apartment and have struggled to keep up with bills. Recently, Jenna became pregnant, and while they're excited, they're also even more stretched. 3 weeks ago, they got their eviction notice. Dan called me in a panic, saying their landlord was horrible and unfair and that this came out of nowhere. I later found out it wasn't sudden at all. They were 4 months behind on rent. They spent money on a baby moon trip, new electronics, and a business investment that was basically Dan trying to flip high-end sneakers. He bought over $3,000 worth of inventory and then couldn't sell most of it. When he called, he immediately jumped to asking if they could stay with me until they get back on their feet. He pitched it like it would be temporary, maybe a month or 2. I've heard that before. Dan has lived with me twice since adulthood. Both times he overstayed by months and left the place messy, loud, and stressful. He and Jenna also fight a lot, loudly, and I didn't want that dynamic in my home again. The last time he stayed, he borrowed my car without asking and got a parking ticket he never paid, so it went to collections under my name. I told him I'd think about it, but that I wasn't comfortable committing to anything yet. He got frustrated, but backed off. 2 days later, he showed up at my house with Jenna in the passenger seat and their car packed full. He said they had nowhere else to go and couldn't afford a storage unit. I told him straight out that I never agreed to let them live with me and that I didn't appreciate being railroaded. Jenna started crying, saying she was stressed and scared and that she didn't know what else to do. I felt awful, but I still said no. I told them I'd pay for a week in a motel, so they had time to come up with a real plan, but I wasn't opening my home again. Dan exploded, saying I was abandoning my family, especially with a baby on the way. He accused me of acting superior because I got lucky with my house. I told him luck had very little to do with me grinding for years, but the conversation was going nowhere. They left after I gave them the motel money, and I haven't heard much since. A few days later, my mom called furious. She said I should be ashamed that family takes care of family, and that I'm sitting alone in a big house while my brother and his pregnant wife bounce between motels. I told her they weren't homeless. They were irresponsible. She said I was being cruel and judgmental and that babies change everything, meaning Dan would step up once the child arrived. I told her Dan has had multiple opportunities to step up in life and hasn't. I asked her why she and my stepdad couldn't take them in. She said they don't have room, which is laughable because their house is about the same size as mine. What she really means is that she doesn't want to deal with the stress, but she thinks I should. Since then, a few relatives have messaged me saying I should help. Others have remained neutral. A cousin who knows my history with Dan said I was right to protect my peace. I still feel sick about it. I don't like seeing Jenna suffer, and I definitely don't want a child caught in the chaos. But I know what taking them in means: months, maybe years of financial and emotional mess landing on me. I worked hard to build a stable life, and I'm terrified of losing it if I get sucked into their problems again, especially while they're bringing a baby into a situation they aren't prepared for. Now Dan is telling everyone that I value my dog more than my own family, which is a low blow. Milo is calm, quiet, and doesn't break my things. Milo has never screamed in my kitchen about someone misplacing car keys or borrowed money from me with no intention of returning it. But apparently pointing that out makes me heartless. My mom keeps sending guilt-heavy messages about how I'm letting a baby become effectively homeless. I keep reminding her that motels are not homelessness and that the baby isn't even born yet. The last conversation we had ended with her saying she didn't recognize me anymore. I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too rigid. Maybe I should have agreed to a strict move-in timeline. But every time I picture how bad it was before, my chest tightens. The yelling, the mess, the unpaid debts, the late-night crashes on my couch with the TV blaring. I can't go through that again. At the same time, I can't shake the guilt. Nobody wants their pregnant sister-in-law living out of a motel. I know things are different when kids are involved, but I also know that enabling patterns only compounds the damage in the long run. So here I am, wondering if I made the right call, or if I'm truly the villain everyone keeps telling me I am. AITA? Hey friends, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely want to know what you enjoy and what we can improve. What did you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future uploads? Your feedback helps us get better every day. Thanks for sticking with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister and her kids move into my house, even though I technically have the space. I'm 34 and bought my house 3 years ago after spending nearly a decade living with roommates, saving every spare dollar and working every overtime shift I could get. It isn't a mansion, but it's a solid 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. And for the first time in my adult life, I have a home that is actually mine. I use one bedroom as my own, one as an office/guest room, and one mostly for storage, hobbies, and overflow. Nothing extravagant, but it works for me. My sister, 32, has 3 kids under 10 and a husband, though the husband part is complicated. They've always been a bit chaotic, but recently things escalated. My brother-in-law quit his job last year because he said he was burned out and wanted to focus on his business idea, which has so far generated exactly $0 and several weird prototypes of something he insists people will need once the next big shift happens. My sister works part-time at a daycare, and their combined income dropped drastically when he quit, but they kept living the same way. This included a leased SUV, expensive kids' extracurriculars, and emergency DoorDash orders whenever they didn't feel like cooking. Unsurprisingly, they fell behind on rent. They bounced between late notices for months, and last week they were served an eviction notice. My sister called me sobbing, saying they were being kicked out and she didn't have anywhere to go. I asked about her husband's family, but she said they were judgmental. I asked about shelters and transitional housing programs, and she burst into tears again, saying she didn't want her kids to experience something so traumatic. Then she asked if they could move in with me just for a few months until they got back on their feet. She said the kids could share one room, she and her husband could take the office, and I could move my desk into my bedroom. She talked like it was already settled. I said no, not angrily, just plainly. I told her I loved her and the kids, but my house wasn't set up for 5 extra people, especially not kids who have energy levels equivalent to rocket thrusters. Also, her husband and I do not get along. He tends to lecture me about how I'm wasting my potential working a regular job instead of pursuing something visionary, and he once hinted I should invest in his product idea, because family supports family. No chance. She immediately switched from crying to furious. She accused me of being selfish and said I didn't understand what it's like to have children. She said I had empty rooms that I was choosing to fill with junk instead of helping my own flesh and blood. She said if the roles were reversed, she would take me in, and that I must value my precious house more than my own nieces and nephew. She even implied that I must not want a relationship with her kids if I was unwilling to help them now. I stayed calm and said again that I wasn't able to take them in. I offered to help pay for a week in a motel while they figured out next steps. I offered to help her look for local programs or negotiate with their landlord. She didn't want any of that. She wanted my house. Her husband later texted me a long paragraph about how family is supposed to stick together and how I'm hoarding space. He said refusing them was an act of moral cowardice and that my life must be empty if a spare bedroom means more to me than my sister's well-being. He said he didn't care about the money for a motel because charity doesn't solve structural problems. He ended it with a weird line about how some people are destined to lead and others just cling to the illusion of stability. A few days later, my mom got involved. She doesn't want them living with her either because she downsized into a small condo after retirement, but she absolutely thinks I should take them in. She said I was being cold and that this was one of those moments in life where family steps up. She told me that one day I might need help and I shouldn't burn bridges. I reminded her that 5 people, including 3 very active kids, would completely upend my home life and that my house is not built to accommodate that many extra bodies. She said that sometimes comfort has to be sacrificed when there's a crisis. My dad, on the other hand, privately texted me that I was doing the right thing and that taking them in would be a disaster. He said my sister has always expected safety nets without changing her behavior. He didn't say this to her, though, because he doesn't want the drama. Now most of my extended family thinks I'm selfish. My sister posted a vague message on social media about being betrayed by someone who pretends to care, and everyone who knows us knows exactly who it's about. Several cousins have messaged me saying I should reconsider because kids shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. One even said it's my moral duty as the more stable sibling. It's gotten to the point that I've stopped responding to family group chats because anything I say leads to a guilt trip. Meanwhile, my sister still won't consider shelters or staying with her in-laws. I know, because she called me again to tell me she's not giving up on me helping and that she'll keep asking until I finally agree. I told her that asking repeatedly won't change my answer and that she needs to start making a real plan. She hung up on me. I'm starting to wonder if I'm truly being selfish. It's not that I don't care about my nieces and nephew. I do. I just don't believe that taking them all in, with no timeline and no guarantee of change, is the answer. My sister insists it's temporary, but her husband doesn't have a job, refuses to get one that isn't aligned with his vision, and has never paid back anyone he's borrowed money from. If they move in, I know they won't leave until I force them out, and I don't want to become the villain who kicks my sister and her kids out twice. But the guilt is getting to me, and the pressure, and the constant implication that I value my comfort more than my family. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let them move in, even though I technically have the space? AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after she blew up my reputation in our town? For context, I'm 34, married to my husband, Mark, and we have a 5-year-old son. My sister, Lily, is 28 and has always had a flair for dramatic life decisions. Growing up, she was the golden child because she was more extroverted and charismatic, and I was the quiet, academic one. Our parents didn't mean to pick favorites, but it was obvious. Lily got away with everything from sneaking out to wrecking my things when she was angry. I learned to keep my distance. About a year ago, Lily moved back to our town after living several states away. She said she wanted to reconnect with family, but the real reason was her breakup with her boyfriend and getting fired from her job for chronic lateness. My parents welcomed her with open arms. I remained polite but cautious. Things started getting complicated when Lily began inserting herself into every aspect of my life. She volunteered to babysit my son constantly, even when we hadn't asked. She would show up at our house unannounced with bags of groceries she couldn't afford, as if she were the one helping us. She started telling people she was practically co-parenting with us, which annoyed Mark, but we tried to let it slide because she was clearly struggling. The turning point came when she got into some fight with a woman named Jenna at a local bar. Jenna is someone I know from the PDA, and she's well-connected socially. According to Lily, Jenna insulted her out of nowhere. According to Jenna and 3 other people who were there, Lily accused Jenna of stealing tips from the bartender, called her some vicious names, and threw a drink at her. Our town is small enough that news travels fast. Within a week, people started avoiding Lily. Instead of accepting she messed up, Lily claimed people were turning on her because of something I said. To my absolute shock, she told people that I had privately warned her about Jenna being dangerous and unhinged, and that I was using Lily to spread rumors I was too cowardly to say myself. This obviously wasn't true. I confronted Lily, and she broke down crying, saying she only said that because she panicked and didn't want people to think she was the problem. I told her she needed to correct the record. She promised she would. She did not. Instead, she doubled down, telling people I had always been jealous of her, that I wanted to make her look unstable so my parents would finally admit I was the better daughter. She said I manipulate people with quiet judgment, which, frankly, is such an absurd description that I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The worst part was when someone from the PDA asked me, very gently, if everything at home was okay and if I was feeling overwhelmed. That's when I realized Lily was painting me as some mentally fragile gossip who was projecting negativity onto everyone around me. Parents started distancing themselves from me at events. A few playdates for my son were suddenly canceled. I stopped speaking to Lily. Completely. My parents said they understood but kept insisting that she didn't mean harm and that Lily wasn't thinking clearly. I told them that if she wanted any relationship with me again, she needed to undo the mess she caused. She never did. Fast forward 4 months. My parents' health has been declining. Nothing dramatic, just the inevitable effects of age. Lily lived with them during that time, but their house needed major repairs after a pipe burst. Insurance would cover the damage, but the house would be unlivable for a month or 2. They wanted Lily to stay with us. I immediately said no. Lily called me crying, saying she had nowhere else to go. According to her, staying with friends wasn't an option because apparently everyone was still believing lies about her, which I noted was ironic considering she created the mess. She said she knew she made mistakes, but begged me to give her a chance. My parents piled on, saying I was choosing resentment over family. Mark supported my decision, saying Lily living with us would be a nightmare. She has no filter, no boundaries, and a proven track record of scorched earth drama. My breaking point was when Lily said that if I didn't let her move in, I was teaching my son it's okay to abandon family when they need help. I told her very calmly that she had spent the last year trying to sabotage my relationships with half the town, and she did it without remorse. She needed to face the consequences of her choices, not hide from them under my roof. She called me cold-hearted and hung up. My parents are furious. They said Lily apologized. She texted me a single sentence saying, "I'm sorry for some things I said," which no, and that I was being vindictive and punishing her beyond what she deserved. They keep insisting that family forgives. I keep insisting that forgiveness does not require me to let someone unstable live in my home around my child. Now extended relatives are chiming in. Some say I'm right. Others say I'm being unnecessarily harsh and should let her stay temporarily. A few think Mark wants to isolate me from my family, which is laughable considering he begged me for years to set firmer boundaries. Lily has not taken responsibility for anything she did. She only wants a comfortable place to stay until the repairs at our parents' house are done. I do feel guilty because I know she truly has nowhere else to go, but the thought of her in my house for even a week makes my stomach hurt. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she nearly destroyed my reputation? AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house after she told everyone it was happening there without asking me? I'm a 34-year-old guy living in the house I inherited from our grandmother. It's a big old place with a nice yard, a barn that has been half converted into a party space, and the kind of property people think of when they imagine rustic outdoor weddings. I've spent a decade and a lot of my own money maintaining and restoring it, doing most of the work myself. It's my favorite place on earth, and I'm proud of what I've built. My sister, Maya, is 29 and getting married to her fiancé, Luke, in about 8 months. They've been together for 3 years, and while I'm not super close to Luke, he's always been polite. My parents adore him. Maya and I have a typical sibling relationship. We get along, we bicker, we annoy each other, whatever. Back in March, she asked if I would consider hosting her wedding. I told her I wasn't sure for a few reasons. Hosting a wedding is a massive undertaking. My house wasn't fully ready for that kind of event, and I wasn't comfortable with the liability or the disruption. But I didn't say no right then. I told her I needed time to think about it. 2 weeks later, she asked again, and this time I did say no. I explained that I loved her, I was happy for her, but it wasn't something I wanted to take on. She seemed disappointed, but didn't argue. I thought that was the end of it. Fast forward to late June. My cousin sent me a screenshot of Maya's wedding website. It lists my address as the official venue. Not a maybe, not a TBD, not even a message giving context. Just ceremony and reception at my address. I honestly thought it was a joke. I called Maya immediately, and she acted confused about why I was upset. She said things like, well, you didn't say no the first time, and you know the house is perfect and your family, you're supposed to help. I reminded her that I did say no, explicitly, weeks ago. She said she thought I didn't really mean it and that I was just being difficult in the moment. I told her point blank to take my address off the site. She sighed, said fine, and we hung up. Except she didn't take it down. I found out because a week later, my parents came over for dinner and casually mentioned that they'd been telling extended family how excited they were for the wedding to be at my place. My mother even said she'd already started thinking about what flowers would look best around the porch. I told them none of this was happening because I had already declined hosting. My parents looked at each other like I'd just spoken in hieroglyphics. My dad said Maya told them I had agreed. My mom said Maya made it sound like I was honored to offer the property. I pulled up the wedding website on my phone and showed them. They were both shocked and asked if maybe Maya misunderstood. I said no, she didn't misunderstand. She just ignored me. The next morning, I called Maya again. She admitted she hadn't changed the website because she didn't want to deal with redoing everything and thought I'd calm down. Calm down about having over 100 people in my home for an event I never agreed to host. I told her she had 24 hours to remove my address and send out corrected invitations, or I would email every guest myself clarifying that my property was not the venue. She started crying, saying I was ruining her dream wedding and embarrassing her. I told her she embarrassed herself. She hung up on me. Within hours, my phone blew up with messages. My mom, she's stressed, can't you compromise? My dad, maybe just the ceremony, then people can go elsewhere for the reception. My aunt, family helps family. Luke, is there anything we could do to change your mind? Maya, how could you do this to me? I ignored most of them and waited. The next morning, I checked the website. My address was still there. So I followed through. I wrote a short but clear message saying that I loved my sister and wished her well, but had never agreed to host the wedding. I sent it to everyone on the guest list who had provided an email. I told them Maya and Luke would be updating the location soon. Chaos erupted. My sister showed up at my house, screaming in the driveway loud enough that neighbors peeked through windows. She said I humiliated her, that everyone now thinks she's disorganized and inconsiderate, and that I made her look like a liar. I told her she did that herself when she told over 100 people something that wasn't true. She ended it by saying she didn't want me at the wedding at all anymore. I calmly said okay. That was her decision, and shut the door. Now the family is split. My parents think Maya was wrong, but believe I went nuclear by emailing the guests. Some relatives say I should have sucked it up because the house is perfect for a wedding. Others say Maya needed to face consequences for lying and steamrolling me. My best friend said he would have done the same thing because people only learn not to push boundaries when they hit a brick wall. But part of me wonders if I should have tried harder to resolve it privately, even though Maya refused to fix the website or tell the truth. So, AITA for refusing to host the wedding and then emailing the guests when my sister wouldn't remove my address. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée use my house for their wedding after they tried to rewrite all my boundaries. A few months ago, my younger brother Liam got engaged to his long-term girlfriend, Jess. Everyone was thrilled. They've been together for years, and honestly, I always assumed they'd eventually get married. I'm 34, he's 29. I own a house with a big yard on a semi-rural property about an hour outside the city. And over the years, that house has quietly become the family hub for holidays, barbecues, and anything that requires space. About 6 weeks ago, Liam and Jess came over for dinner. But they weren't carrying flowers or dessert. They had a whole PowerPoint presentation stored on Liam's laptop. They pitched the idea of holding their wedding at my property. They described it as a perfect rustic aesthetic with the big trees, open lawn, and fire pit area. And honestly, I was touched at first. It's flattering to think your home is beautiful enough for someone's wedding. I didn't immediately say yes, but I didn't say no. I told them I needed time to consider what hosting a 150-person wedding would involve. I work full-time, live alone, and although I love my place, keeping it tidy for regular life is very different from staging it for a major event. Over the next week, my phone blew up. Jess sent me vision boards, color palettes, Pinterest photos of weddings on farms, and a detailed description of how they wanted everything set up. Her enthusiasm was charming until it wasn't. First came the assumption that I'd cover landscaping costs, not just mowing or basic gardening. She wanted new flower beds, string lights installed permanently on the trees, a fresh coat of paint on the barn, which I use as a workshop, and gravel added to the driveway because the bridal party shouldn't get their heels stuck. She felt like she was doing me a favor by upgrading my property. The cost estimate, over $5,000. I told her I wasn't comfortable paying for any renovations for a wedding that wasn't even mine. She smiled, but it was the type of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said, "Oh, I thought you'd be excited to help make our day magical." Then came the guest list. 150 people, parking for 60 cars, outdoor bathrooms that I would need to rent because she didn't want guests using my house. And then, unbelievably, she said she wanted me to stay someplace else the night before and the day of the wedding because she wanted the space to feel fully theirs. I said no, firmly. I told her I wasn't hosting a wedding that required me to vacate my own home. Liam called later, saying Jess had cried for an hour and felt like I didn't want to support them. But he also admitted that some of her expectations were unrealistic. Then things escalated. Jess made a group chat with me, my parents, and her parents, and framed the issue as me refusing to participate in a wedding unless I got my way. She never mentioned the renovations or eviction request. She made it sound like I shut them down immediately, which wasn't true. My parents, who had no idea about the details, told me to just be flexible. I explained everything privately to them, and they admitted Jess's list was unreasonable. But they also said, Liam really wants this, and it's just one day. A few days later, Jess sent a new message saying she'd compromise. Her compromise was that I could stay in the house, but only in my bedroom, and I needed to remain out of sight so I wouldn't accidentally walk into photos or disturb the event flow. She also still wanted the landscaping done, except she said she and Liam would pay for half, so still thousands of dollars. I told them I was no longer comfortable hosting the wedding at all. Period. Both of them immediately got upset. Jess said I was prioritizing grass and paint over family. Liam told me I was being cold and transactional. I reminded them I never offer my house. They asked me, and their requests turned what could have been an honor into a stressful nightmare. Word spread through the family thanks to Jess, who apparently told her cousins that I banned them from having the wedding they dreamed of. My aunt called me and said I was being petty. My uncle, on the other hand, told me he would have shut that down much earlier. Then Jess's mother called me, something she has never done before, and said she hoped I would reconsider for the sake of family harmony. I told her politely that my decision was final. The latest development? Liam and Jess have booked a different venue, and Jess has now unfollowed me on Instagram. Liam is talking to me, but with short, clipped answers. My mom says things will cool down, but my dad thinks Jess manipulated the situation to get what she wanted and is now punishing me because it didn't work. I feel torn. I truly wanted to support them, but I also feel like they treated my home like a free blank canvas and me like staff. AITA? AITA for refusing to participate in my sister's wedding because of her choice of bridesmaids? This is going to be long, but I need to get it all out to figure out if I'm really the bad guy here. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Emily, 25F, who's getting married next spring. We've always been close-ish, though we've had our fights like any siblings. Growing up, Emily was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. I was the responsible one, got good grades, etc., but somehow she always got the perks and attention. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me, but I never let it interfere with my relationship with her. Fast forward to the wedding planning. Emily asked me to be a bridesmaid last year, and I said yes. Initially, I was excited. I love weddings, I love my sister, and I genuinely wanted to support her. Then she started telling me about her bridesmaids. And this is where things started getting weird. Emily invited her college friends, who I've met a few times but barely know, and two of her coworkers who she doesn't even hang out with outside of work. But the thing that bothered me most, she didn't invite me at all in any capacity to her special planning group that included all of her bridesmaids. She also started discussing gifts and outfits in a way that made it clear I was considered less important. She said something along the lines of, "You're my sister, of course you're in the wedding, but these are my besties. You'll see when the dress comes in." I tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just wedding drama. But the deeper we got into planning, the more I realized she was excluding me from every meaningful decision. She made a group chat for the bridesmaids, without me, and discussed everything from the bachelorette trip to bridesmaid responsibilities. I was only told what was happening through vague texts. Then came the final straw. She posted a poll in the bridesmaids chat about dress colors and asked, "Which one should we make, my name? Where?" This was after I had already voiced my strong dislike for a particular color that I absolutely cannot wear because of a skin condition that makes me break out when certain dyes are used. She didn't seem to care and insisted that I just go with what everyone else picked. When I expressed my concerns, she got defensive and said, "You're being dramatic. It's just a dress. You're in my wedding. Isn't that enough?" I felt completely disrespected. This wasn't about the color or the dress anymore. It was about being treated like an afterthought in my own sister's wedding. I brought it up to her directly. I said, "Emily, I feel like you're treating me like a token bridesmaid. I'm happy for you, but I don't want to be part of something where I'm not considered equally." She got upset and accused me of trying to ruin her wedding and making everything about me. I tried reasoning, telling her that I could still be supportive, maybe help with planning behind the scenes, or even walk her down the aisle if she wanted, but I didn't want to be shoved into a role where I felt invisible. She said I was overreacting and cold, and told me that if I couldn't be a bridesmaid, then maybe I shouldn't be involved at all. I thought about it for a long time and decided to step back. I told her I couldn't be a bridesmaid under the current circumstances because it made me feel unappreciated and excluded. I also said I'd be there to celebrate in other ways and support her from the sidelines. The fallout has been intense. My parents are upset with me because they think I'm picking fights and should just be happy for Emily. My friends are split. Some think I'm justified. Some think I'm overreacting. Emily has barely spoken to me since I told her, and when she does, it's passive-aggressive comments about how it's just a dress or weddings are stressful. I understand weddings can be stressful, but this isn't about stress for me. It's about being treated as if my feelings and comfort don't matter. I feel hurt and sidelined, and I genuinely don't want to be part of that dynamic. I haven't changed my mind, but I'm starting to feel guilty. I'm afraid I might be the bad guy here for refusing to participate in my sister's wedding, especially since my parents keep implying that I'm being selfish. So, AITA for refusing to be a bridesmaid because of how I'm being treated by my sister and her bridesmaids. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé take my car on our family vacation. This is going to be long, so bear with me. I, 28F, have a 2018 Subaru Outback that I absolutely love. I take very good care of it, both mechanically and cosmetically. I spend a lot of time making sure it's clean, organized, and in perfect working order. It's not an especially expensive car, but it's mine, and I feel very protective of it. My younger sister, Emma, 25F, recently got engaged to a guy named Kyle, 27M. They've been dating for 3 years. Kyle is generally a nice guy, but he has a reputation in our family for being a bit careless, especially with other people's belongings. For instance, last year he borrowed my mom's car and returned it with a dent in the door and a spilled soda in the passenger seat. Mom was understandably upset, and it took a while to get the dent fixed. Anyway, our family has a tradition of taking a big road trip every summer. This year, the plan was for all of us, my parents, my sister, and me, to drive up the coast and rent a house for a week. I was excited, but my excitement started to dwindle when I found out that Kyle wanted to drive. He insisted he'd use my car because he claims his car isn't comfortable enough for a long drive. I immediately said no. I explained that my car is very important to me. I've invested a lot in keeping it in perfect condition, and after what happened with my mom's car, I don't feel comfortable letting him drive it. My sister got upset, saying I was being ridiculous and controlling, and that Kyle is a responsible adult who wouldn't break anything. I reminded her about the soda incident, but she brushed it off and said it was a minor mistake. My parents sided with me at first. They agreed that Kyle has a history of being careless. However, when I told them I wouldn't budge, Emma started crying and saying I was ruining their vacation and making her fiancé feel unwelcome. She said I was being selfish and that it's just a car, not a big deal. My parents started getting frustrated with me for not compromising and causing unnecessary tension. I offered alternatives. I said Kyle could drive his own car, we could rent a separate car for him, or even switch drivers periodically. But Emma said none of those options were acceptable. According to her, if Kyle couldn't drive my car, it would make the trip awkward and embarrassing for him in front of the family. I stood my ground. I told everyone that I was not going to risk damage to my car, and that if Kyle couldn't drive, he would have to make other arrangements. That led to a huge argument. My sister accused me of being dramatic, overprotective, and a terrible sister. My mom tried to mediate, but ended up saying, "You're both being ridiculous," which of course didn't help. The situation escalated further. Kyle started passive-aggressively complaining about how no one trusts him, and he can't even enjoy a vacation with his future in-laws without drama. My dad tried to reason with him, pointing out the soda incident and mentioning how careful we all have to be with shared property, but Kyle said that was in the past, and it doesn't count. Eventually, my parents announced that they were going to rent a second car for Kyle. Emma was furious and refused to talk to me for the rest of the day. She claimed I had ruined her engagement experience and that Kyle feels like an outsider because of me. During the vacation, Kyle constantly made comments about how hard it is to have a fiancé who doesn't trust you at all. He complained to my parents and tried to pressure them into letting him drive my car anyway, but they refused. Emma kept giving me dirty looks and avoiding me, and it made the trip really uncomfortable. At one point, she yelled at me in front of everyone, saying, "I can't believe you put a car over my happiness." When we returned home, the tension hasn't fully died down. My sister is still upset with me and has hinted that she's reconsidering how close we are. My parents are frustrated with me for making a big deal out of car, and Kyle has made a few snide remarks on social media about how some people value things over family. I feel like I did the right thing. My car is important to me, and Kyle's track record shows that letting him drive it would be risky. It's not about controlling him or being difficult. It's about protecting something I care about. I also offered multiple compromises, but Emma and Kyle refused them. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister's fiancé drive my car on our family vacation? AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancé move into my house rent-free, even though she deserves it? I, 32M, live in a mid-sized city in the U.S., and I've been renting a 2-bedroom apartment for the last 5 years. I've worked hard to save money and make my apartment a comfortable home, and honestly, I really value my privacy. My younger brother, Jake, 28M, has been dating his now-fiancée, Emily, 27F, for about 3 years. Emily is sweet, but she's extremely entitled and has a history of trying to push boundaries to get what she wants. About 2 months ago, Jake told me that he and Emily had decided to move in together, but they were having trouble finding a place because of their credit scores. Emily, apparently, suggested that they just move into my apartment rent-free for a while until we get back on our feet. She called it a temporary solution, but didn't specify how long that would be. Jake brought it up with me, as though it were a done deal. I told him I wasn't comfortable with the idea. My apartment is not huge, and I work long hours from home, so having 2 more people live with me rent-free would be extremely disruptive. I also have a strict policy about sharing my space. I've never let roommates move in unless they're contributing to rent or utilities. I explained all of this to Jake and Emily, hoping they'd understand. Jake seemed hesitant, but Emily immediately started guilt-tripping me, saying things like, "You have so much space. Why shouldn't you help family? And we're family. It's not like we're asking for forever." I tried to compromise by suggesting that maybe they could stay for a week or two if absolutely necessary, but Emily kept pressing for months. She started sending me messages almost daily with articles about helping family and posts about how people should help loved ones in need. It felt manipulative, and honestly, it was making me anxious. The breaking point came last week. Jake called me and said Emily was upset because I refused to support the family, and that she thought it was selfish of me not to let them move in rent-free. She even went as far as implying that I don't really care about my brother's happiness if I don't help them. Jake was trying to mediate, but he admitted that Emily basically made him feel guilty for not pushing me harder. I told Jake that I wasn't going to change my mind. I love my brother and want to support him, but I cannot compromise my living situation to accommodate someone who doesn't respect boundaries. Jake got frustrated and said I was being ridiculously rigid, and that families should help each other when they're struggling. I tried to explain that helping doesn't have to mean living rent-free in someone else's apartment. I even offered to help them look for apartments, co-sign if needed, or lend some money temporarily, but Emily apparently thought all of those options were inferior to moving in with me. After that conversation, Jake told me he was upset and might reconsider his engagement to Emily if she continues acting this way. I feel torn because I don't want to cause a rift in my family, but I also feel like this is entirely unreasonable. Emily has started subtly bad-mouthing me to mutual friends, saying I'm selfish and don't value family. I haven't responded to any of that because I don't want to escalate the situation. I don't think I'm being unreasonable. I've set boundaries, explained my reasons, and offered alternative ways to help. But my brother seems torn between me and his fiancée, and Emily is very vocal about how wrong she thinks I am. It's creating tension not just between us, but also in my extended family, because some relatives have started asking why I won't help family in need. So Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother's fiancée move in rent-free, even though she claims she deserves it and is pressuring both me and my brother? Some extra context. My apartment has one bedroom for me and a guest room. It's cozy, but not really suitable for 3 adults long-term. I've always been the family member who pays their own way, and I've had relatives move in before, but they always contributed something financially. Jake and Emily make decent money individually, but they are having credit problems that are temporary. I offer to help them financially in ways that don't involve moving in, but Emily dismissed every alternative as not enough. I just want to keep my space and maintain healthy boundaries without becoming the villain in my family's eyes. Would love to hear your thoughts. Character count, 6,132 if you want. I can draft a slightly longer version that reaches close to 7,000 characters with more detailed dialogue and internal thoughts to fully capture the classic Reddit storytelling style. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to let my sister's wedding ruin my family tradition and being accused of ruining her special day. So I, 32M, come from a family that's very particular about traditions. For context, we've had a tradition for over 40 years where every Thanksgiving, the eldest child of the family hosts a big family dinner at their house. It's not just a dinner. It's almost like a ceremonial gathering. Every year, the host decides the menu, decor, and the seating arrangement. It's been that way since I can remember, and every host has respected this structure. People actually plan their schedules around it, and it's a point of pride for us. Now, my younger sister, Sarah, 29F, got engaged last year. She's always been more free-spirited than the rest of us and doesn't care much for our traditions. When she got engaged, she immediately announced that she wanted her wedding and reception to happen over Thanksgiving weekend. I was surprised, but I thought it was a minor conflict and maybe she could work something out. After all, we usually start planning Thanksgiving months in advance, and it's a big logistical thing. Fast forward a few months, Sarah starts hinting at how family traditions are so outdated and that she wants her friends to feel included, not just our rigid family structure. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just being dramatic about wedding planning stress. But then she told me she had already booked a venue and started sending out invites that conflicted with our usual Thanksgiving dinner date. This is where the real problem began. I told her she needed to reconsider the date. I explained that our Thanksgiving dinner is non-negotiable for the family, especially for my parents. They are in their late 60s and have hosted or coordinated it for decades. It's not just a meal, it's a family ritual. I suggested she move her wedding either a week before or after Thanksgiving. I even offered to help her find an alternative date, and even help with logistics if it meant she could have her dream wedding. She refused, saying she doesn't want to live her life around outdated rules, and accused me of being controlling. At this point, I reached out to my parents and my other siblings to figure out a solution. Everyone agreed that Thanksgiving dinner couldn't be skipped or moved. We even suggested compromising by having her wedding on the day of Thanksgiving, but scheduling the dinner either earlier or later in the day. She said that wasn't acceptable because she wanted the whole weekend for herself and her fiancé. I was starting to feel like she was being unreasonable, but I didn't want to escalate things, so I tried one last thing. I offered to let her have the ceremony or reception at the house in the evening after our dinner, which meant she'd have the venue and family presence without disrupting tradition. She called me controlling again and said I was trying to sabotage her happiness to preserve some silly old ritual. My parents were frustrated because they didn't want to be in the middle, but they also supported the tradition. They've always treated Thanksgiving as sacred family time. The breaking point came when Sarah sent out an official family advisory email to all relatives saying that she hopes everyone will support her new, modern approach to holidays, and that anyone attending Thanksgiving dinner must RSVP or risk being uninvited from her wedding. That felt manipulative and cruel to me. I decided to respond honestly, telling everyone that Thanksgiving dinner is a fixed family event and that if they want to attend her wedding, they could do so without forcing our tradition to bend around her schedule. This caused a massive family argument over email and text. Relatives started taking sides, and the conversation turned heated. Some agreed with me, some with her, and a few said I was being an unreasonable stickler for rules instead of being happy for my sister. On the day of Thanksgiving, Sarah refused to even attend our family dinner. She went straight to her wedding venue with her closest friends and left the rest of us at home. Some cousins tried to make peace. Others were visibly upset that the traditional dinner had been overshadowed by the wedding drama. My parents were heartbroken because they'd been looking forward to a joyful family gathering and instead had to manage tensions between their kids. The dinner itself went on as usual, but it was awkward, and several family members left early, clearly conflicted about the whole situation. Sarah has since refused to speak to me directly, only communicating through our parents. She's accused me of ruining her special day and being selfish and controlling, while I feel like I was defending a long-standing family tradition that she deliberately chose to clash with. A few relatives have told me privately that I should have compromised more or just let her have her way. But I honestly feel like some things, like family traditions, shouldn't be completely discarded for the sake of convenience or personal preference. Now, several months later, the tension hasn't subsided. Holidays are awkward, and family gatherings feel strained. I genuinely feel like I was trying to balance respect for family tradition with a willingness to compromise for my sister's big day. At the same time, I understand why she feels hurt because she believes her wedding should have been the ultimate priority. I keep questioning myself. Did I handle this correctly, or did I let my attachment to tradition make me rigid and unkind? So Reddit, AITA for refusing to move or change Thanksgiving dinner for my sister's wedding and defending our family tradition, even though it resulted in her being upset and not attending. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss new uploads. And feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean the world to me. See you in the next video.